We need 2 minutes. And we also have a request from Kifa to have
Yeah, I
the
got that.
You got that. And Leela, can you put that?
Mm-hmm. Time to, we're reconvening as the, I guess not reconvening, but convening as the Board of Trustees of the California Online Community College, or COCC, as I like to call it. We'll start with the roll call.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Present.
Darius Anderson. Arnaldo Avalos.
Here.
Jeffrey Baum.
Here.
Connie Conway. Amy Costa.
Here.
Tom Epstein.
Here.
Jolena Grande.
Here.
Pamela Haynes. Jennifer Perry. Mon Thon.
Here.
Bill Rawlings. Valerie Shaw.
Here.
Blas Villalobos.
Here.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Here.
Alexis Zaragoza.
Here.
Okay, and to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, we're going to have another one of our new board members, Mr. Villalobos.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, on the agenda, we're going to start with item 1, and then we're going to go to item 3 before we do item 2, the Brown Act training. So start with Vice Chancellor LaForestier. Oh.
You want to make any comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was jumping ahead of the President's report. No, I think I don't need to make a report. And does the, so it's the CEO's report? Oh, we don't.
There's just been a lot of great work happening. I want to thank all the members of the board who have been actively involved, those who went to the IDO workshop. So I just want to thank everyone and for having the patience as we stand this up, and for your cooperation and all of your hard work. We realize that this is an additional commitment, so thank you.
Okay, and then now first up is the minutes of the last meeting.
So President Epstein, Board of Trustees members, just want to acknowledge that this is your first meeting where you're listed as the Board of Trustees. You are making history. And this item is to approve your August 6, 2018 board meeting minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
A second.
Anybody comment? Okay,
Quick question.
yeah.
Is it worth acknowledging that there were some board members who attended at a distance location? Me included.
Right. Oh, that somewhere, I don't know if that's, is it necessary to say that some were in a different location, if they were all still in attendance?
Not necessary, but we can
Okay.
certainly denote it if you would like.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions? Okay, let's move
I will
on.
abstain since I wasn't there at the meeting, if
Okay.
that makes any sense.
Okay, Member Fawn abstains. Okay, moving on now to the report from legal counsel, Deputy Chancellor, or Vice Chancellor LaForestier. General counsel, whatever.
Something counted.
He doesn't want any additional duties.
Okay, so this is item 2 that we're doing now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to invite representatives of the Fagan Freeman firm. up
No, it's
here.
item 1. Item 1, sorry.
We did, item one.
According to this agenda, okay, I'm sorry, I had an obsolete agenda.
Okay, so you'll recall that at the last Board of Trustees meeting, the Chancellor was given authority to go forth and contract for legal services on behalf of the Board of Trustees. And we engaged in a competitive process and evaluated a number of firms. The evaluation committee consisted of the Chancellor, President Epstein, Ajita Menon, and myself, and Andrea Meyer from the Foundation. And as a result of that process, we selected Fagan, Freeman, and Fulfrost as the attorneys for the Board of Trustees. And so we wanted to give you an opportunity to meet the principal members of the team who will be representing you. And I've provided the biographies in the board agenda, so if you have any questions for them, it would be an opportunity to ask questions about their experience and plans for their representation, and for them to also report to you what they have done thus far.
Good afternoon. My name is Namita Brown, and I represent Fagan, Friedman, and Fulfrost. I am responsible for being your general counsel as part of this project, and with me is a group of lawyers that will be assisting us throughout the process. We all have different specialties. It's a wide range of experience. F3, as we call ourselves, Fagan, Friedman, Fulfrost, F3. Our competitors call us the Fers. I will also say that. But F3 is an education leader. We represent school districts, community colleges, higher education institutions such as UC and Cal State, in a wide variety of issues, from labor and employment, from constructing facilities, to bond measures, to special education, to accessibility issues, to technology issues. We are probably best known for our innovative technology practice. So I will let my partners introduce themselves to you. But I am out of Oakland. I do mostly labor and employment work. I advise boards and governance, and my area of expertise is negotiating where there is implementation of technology, negotiating with unions when districts and employers implement technology in the classroom, all the effects that arise out of it. That is what I do for a living. So I'm going to turn it over to my partners this way and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Mark Williams. I, along with Gretchen Shipley to my right, are the heads of the eMatters practice group for F3. We specialize in technology, data security, and data privacy. We serve as general counsel for CETPA, which is the California Educational Technology Professionals Association. We're also legal advisors to the SDPC, which is a nationwide consortium of school districts and companies seeking to come up with contract agreements and specifications to ensure data privacy. Part of our work with school districts is to ensure that data privacy will be protected by vendors. We have constructed and drafted a California Student Data Privacy Agreement, which about 600 manufacturers and 300 school districts have adopted. With SDPC, we're adopting a model uniform agreement for data privacy for school institutions across the country. We also serve as liaison between school districts and large digital companies such as Apple, Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and are working with them to revise their agreements to meet the needs of local educational institutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Again, I'm Gretchen Shipley, and I should mention Mark is out of our Oakland office in Northern California. I am based out of our San Diego office. So again, we co-chair our education technology practice, and some additional work that we do is we handle a lot of policy work when you're implementing education technology. And I want to share with you some of the scale of some of the projects we do. In addition to CSDPA, we recently have been working with the California State Library System to transition all of the state library materials online. We also work with several counties throughout, county offices of education, and implementing interagency data agreements and online portals for example, we're working with Kern County right now. They have a network of 47 school districts, and it incorporates their community college and university system there. And another statewide project we've done is for technology professionals. There's an online certification program, and we work with about 20 public agencies and nonprofits to implement, it's called Leading Edge Certification. But so the education technology component of it incorporates the governance, the labor and employment, the data agreement, and the contract negotiations. We are really, truly a full service education technology practice.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Diane Marshall Freeman, and I'm from the Far North office. I'm out of the Sacramento office, and it is an honor to serve as your general counsel. I just wanted to share a little bit about my background. I'm probably the senior of this group here. I've been practicing just about 34 years. My areas of expertise lie with governance, student issues, Title IX. I am the head of the firm's higher education practice group. I work with the community colleges and the California State University system. I am currently this year the chair of the Council of School Attorneys, which is a national organization for school attorneys across the country, and on the board of directors for the National School Boards Association.
I didn't make the front row, but my name is Chris Keeler. I'm particularly pleased to be here today, being a proud graduate of Bonita Vista High School, which is across the street, a former student of Southwestern College. My mother worked here for over 20 years, so this is very pleasing. I am the managing partner of F3. I've been practicing education law for about 24 years. Prior to that, I had a short stint with San Diego Gas and Electric Company in their regulatory department, and I will tell you what a joy it is to do education law. I have practiced mainly in governance, in labor and employment, and in business transactional practice. I've done a wide variety of other things as well, being a generalist and having practiced with the firm for a number of years. I am truly interested in the mission that the online community college has. I think it fits a particular need, and now is the time for it, and this is one of the most exciting things that I've seen with this firm in the history of the firm. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
And if I may just give a general update on some of the things that we've done, we have, you will of course hear about it and vote on it later today, but we entered into agreement or agreed to terms of a agreement with the foundation to provide administrative support and financial institution support to the online community college district. We've entered into personal services agreements that fall within the parameters that the Board of Trustees has given to the Chancellor to hire members of the advanced team that can actually set the process of establishing the college and getting the work done. So you will hear about it as we go on. We're also working on board policies for the board, as well as a Form 700 quick update. We are not going to take too much of your time at the next session. Just give you a quick update around Form 700, because as a legislative body and as trustees of this particular entity, you have a Form 700 obligation as well. So we will do that, but that's the scope of work that we have done thus far.
Anybody have any comments or questions for the attorneys?
Good luck. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do want to note that they participated in a competition with several other firms that we picked, and we were delighted with the performance that they did in that interview process, and also since then. Okay, now we're going to go to item 4, the agreements with the foundation.
Okay, so you will recall that at the last Board of Trustees meeting, the board invoked its statutory authority to contract with the foundation and asked the chancellor to do so. We have negotiated 2 agreements with the foundation, and I'll hand this over to Mark to walk you through the specifics of them in a moment. There is an administrative services agreement, which is provides for a pretty thorough array of back office support for the online college advanced team. And the advanced team is going to be comprised of people who are contractors of the foundation, and also some people who are employed with the foundation and will be devoting some percentage of their time to online college work until there is a full transition to the CEO and whatever team the CEO puts in place. So the administrative services agreement is to support that work, and we found in the process of going through this that it was just a little bit easier to conceptualize the arrangements if we separated an administrative services piece from a fiscal services piece. So there's also a fiscal services piece that provides for the transfer of $10 million to the foundation so that those funds are easily accessible. Mark, do you want to walk through it?
Sure. I'll take a brisk walk through the agreement with you. Keeping in mind as we walk through this, we wanted to advance 3 goals. And I'm going to start first with the administrative services agreement. We wanted the agreement to be as comprehensive as possible in terms of outlining their duties, the foundation's duties. 2, we understand that this is going to be a fast-paced assignment. They need to hit the ground running. 3, we know that as you hire staff and they assume responsibilities, the duties and dynamics of this contractual relationship is going to change. So we had to build in both a goal of comprehensive and flexibility at the same time. So why don't we turn first to the term of the agreement, and it's an annual agreement that you can renew or choose not to renew, and that's at paragraph 2. The agreement will be formed and coordinated by an advanced team, and that's at paragraph 3 and page 2 of the agreement. And it was interesting coming up with language here because we know that the funding source, and this is the administrative support agreement that you're looking at. Both agreements look very similar, and I apologize for the format duplication, but it's the administrative services agreement that we're looking at now. So turn to page 2, and at paragraph 3, the advanced team will form the nucleus of the operations under this agreement. The advanced team is a composite organization comprised of both foundation employees and contractors and online college employees and contractors. Despite differing beginnings and differing funding sources, paragraph 3 makes clear that the loyalties and duties of everyone on the advanced team lie towards the online college. What we wanted to do, moving down to paragraph 4, we thought it important to have an initial meeting once this agreement becomes effective, to get everyone in the same place at the same time and come up with common source documents to guide their activities throughout the term of this agreement. So that's paragraph 4 the initial meeting. They're going to assign tasks, come up with a timeline, and an initial budget. We've also come up with the idea of having what's called a matrix of responsibility. A matrix of responsibility is a line item of duties. What is the task that we need to perform? And then arrayed on the right will be who's responsible for that task and who's responsible for assisting in that task. So you have clear boundaries from the very beginning. Going back to the fact that duties are evolving over time on this agreement, go to paragraph 5. In regular intervals, the advance team is going to meet and, if necessary, modify the timelines and make changes to the roster of the advance team, because as your duties develop, you'll be adding people to the team. Then on paragraph 6, this is the comprehensive section of the duties that they will be fulfilling. We tried to be, in terms of a general sense, as broad-based as possible. So we have budgeting and business processes. We have finance and accounting functions, legal contracts, management and governance, purchasing, information technology. And I should say that I took special interest in developing that subsection. External relations, marketing and communications design, office space if needed, and then a system of foundation administrative support services. You'll notice that in a couple of places in paragraph 6, we've made reference to the fiscal agreement that we will look at in a minute. We needed both documents to talk to each other, so we used similar language and cross-referenced each other. So even though you have two separate documents, they are integrated. And I'll tell you why we went to two separate documents in just a minute. Okay, so let's turn the page to page 5, the compensation structure. The compensation structure is a little complicated, and it has a number of components to it. The first subsection is, in terms of how much the foundation employees and contractors will be paid, it's based on the concept of allocable costs. So in other words, they will be keeping time records to show when they're working for the online college and when they're working at other duties, so that in terms of invoicing, we can track and make sure that there's accountability there. Second is, we will be paying their direct costs. And direct costs are, to keep it straight, it's a combination of wages and salaries plus benefits. And if you'll see at the end, there's also reimbursable expenses, such as travel, that kind of thing. Indirect costs are, if you'll see, that's the next line item. Indirect costs are the overhead. And I should say, the foundation has been very commendable in lowering their overhead rates to 10%. 10% is considered a floor by the Office of Management and Budget. And in many cases, contracts, the overhead for a contract administration can be 15 or even % or higher. But they agreed to come in at 10%, which is, I think, a very solid number for us.
15% would be exceedingly high for an admin cost. 10% is the outward limit. I don't know what community colleges do for their admin cost for grants, but 10% is the maximum finance will ever give any state entity for administrative cost.
Community colleges, districts, depending on if you calculate using the federal rules, what overhead costs are probably in excess of 35%. So we have tried to sort of live between the two worlds.
Okay. That's what I have on the administrative services contracts. Unless there's any questions, I'll move briskly to the fiscal agency agreement.
Member Baum.
So again, who would compose this advanced team? Is it existing staff in the chancellor's office, or is it exist?
So the
I'm glad
advanced
you
team, the advanced team was initiated initially through philanthropic dollars as we were going through the legislative process, begin to map out. So it is the Chancellor's office and now the interim CEO of the online college that has pulled together the advanced team for the purposes of initiating some of the activities.
But who are, I mean, but are they drawn from the pool of people within the Chancellor? Are they independent contractors that we recruited, or?
Right. They are not from the Chancellor's office. We are very sensitive not to give additional duties or take time away from the existing activities of the Chancellor's office employees. Some of these folks are through the foundation. The rest, we have gone through some sort of recruitment process and contracted with them as an independent contractor.
Okay, I see my colleague, and you were going to point out, there's an Exhibit A that describes the exam. But they were drawn, the ones who are listed from the online college are people that were recruited to serve in this capacity for us.
Yes, and in some cases, they're individuals who have specific expertise that lie within the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Member Costa.
I just have kind of a broader process question, which is, I know you guys are new, but going forward, it's going to be exceedingly helpful if we can get these agreements much more in advance than we were given today. We have an attorney on the board who I would like her to be able to review some of these agreements, and it's difficult for us to review them right now. Secondarily, I'm interested in how the $10 million was arrived at between the two contracts and how that dovetails with the overall appropriation of 120. Based on some of the sections you've just brought through to us, it's like they're going to figure it out. And I just want to voice that I'm uncomfortable with that. I'd prefer that there was a budget established and that these service agreements reflected the budget that was established, knowing that we may require some flexibility because this is all happening real time. Even just a broad-based budget would be helpful because I want to ensure the advanced team has work to be done for sure, but we also have to think about the whole fiscal year and what fiscal resources are available for the online college as it gets up and running.
And to briefly answer your question, there is a budget. We'd be happy to spend time having it agendized going forward for the advanced team that involves both philanthropic dollars as well as online college dollars. And of course, it is our intent to utilize philanthropic dollars first to the extent possible. Second, at the last online college meeting, we were given authority to enter into the agreement, so we wanted to make sure and bring them back. But absolutely, we will get the horse back in front of the cart here as we roll this forward. But for the purposes of getting moving on the aggressive timeline that we have, we did seek authority from the Board of Trustees initially to set up some initial agreements, like the hiring of the law firm.
Please go to the table.
It is probably also worth mentioning that the contract is not in lieu of the obligations that we have to the Board of Trustees with respect to the standing policies related to contracting, including the $100,000 threshold for contracts, as well as the $50,000 above which things will be bidded out. So definitely hear you and understand you on the kind of broad strokes on the budget, but just wanted folks to also appreciate in the room that this is also carried out in terms of the policies that have been adopted by the board.
Before we take other comments too, I just wanted to comment on the process question of the cart before the horse. I agree that these materials were all very late, and I understand why. I think we are going to have to get used to being a little uncomfortable because of the incredible obligation we have to get this college up and running in 12 months or And so I think there are going to be some problems with lack of early provision of documents, but I hope we can certainly do better than we did this time. But we all just have to be flexible in light of this very pressing time frame we're under. But now I think we have some comments.
I got mine answered.
And again, just so I am clear on this, I'm looking at the advanced team. So Ajita, physically though, are you in the chancellor's office or in the foundation's office? I mean, where will you be sitting and doing your work, as well as the other folks listed as part of the online college?
So the foundation is actually identifying some space for us currently. Right now, we are located on the third floor hub, which is a space that is shared by both the chancellor's office and the foundation. So the additional space will be
And
identified.
the foundation will be helping us with that as part of that
Correct.
administrative agreement. And then the folks who are listed on the advanced team are entitled to compensation in using the rates listed below, attached in Exhibit B.
Yes, we've attempted to keep everybody in line with that same rate schedule.
So let me, one point of clarification. So the administrative services agreement is designed to define the foundation's responsibilities as providing administrative services to the advanced team. And so anybody who is working on the online college is defined broadly as part of the advanced team. So I'm there and the chancellor is there. And obviously, they're not going to be providing administrative support to the chancellor and I in our capacity as working in for the chancellor's office. But to the extent that I am helping to prepare a board agenda for the Board of Trustees and transfer it to somebody at the foundation ultimately who will do the compiling, the foundation needs to know that, okay, they may receive some work from me or from the chancellor. And so that is the concept that we're trying to explain here. And then the Exhibit B, which outlines the allocable costs, those are the charges that the foundation staff will be devoting when they are providing administrative services to the advanced team. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And of course, again, it is the intent that, as was mentioned, that we move over time away from this agreement to staff our own accounting functions, to staff our own HR functions. But in the near term, we needed some support, and that was allowable based on the statutory language.
Member Haynes.
So I just want to be clear on the delineation of responsibilities, and I can visualize and see how that happens with the executive in terms of rate schedule. What I can't see, and I don't know to what extent it's required or important to do or legal. So if you can clarify the role of your position, Mr. Mark.
Forrest J.
Sorry. and Chancellor Oakley's. I know that you will be doing certain activities, and am I clear that you're not getting money for that piece of it? Let me keep my language simple.
Unfortunately, that is true.
Okay. Well, but there is time that will be expended. Is there an expectation that you are keeping, since there is no money, but that's changing hands, but is there an expectation of you identifying the amount of time?
No. So the legislature has established by statute that the chancellor has authority to act essentially as the interim CEO, and at the last Board of Trustees meeting, that function was authorized. So when I am interacting with the Board of Trustees council, I'm essentially acting as the chancellor's agent, acting on his behalf in coordinating activities for the online college. And I expect that that will, and the same is true for Deputy Chancellor Gonzalez. So I expect that that role will continue until we are able to transition to a CEO, and the CEO can bring on their team, and that probably will continue until January, and then probably a transition period after that.
Well, thank you for giving me the timeline. That's helpful.
Okay.
I just want to say as a point of order here, we need to have this meeting end by 2:30, and I wanted to alert everyone who's going to be speaking in it that that is a very hard deadline for many of us. Thank you.
Why don't I give some brief comments about the fiscal agency agreement? As you read through it, you will see that in marked contrast to the administrative services agreement, the fiscal agency agreement's duties are quite limited. So if the best way to view it would be to go to Exhibit A, paragraph 4. And to think about the fiscal agency agreement, in many ways, it's a traditional banking agreement. They're going to establish accounts for you. They're going to keep a charge of the accounts for you. They're going to give you monthly statements about those accounts. And they're also going to help you effectuate releases of monies from the state controller's office if you elect to do so. So why did we even make this a second agreement? We did it for two reasons. One is we wanted an accountability document so that you can clearly track the services that are being rendered. And again, there is a hourly rate sheet. Second thing is, unlike the administrative services agreement, there are certain fiduciary duties that attaches to a fiscal agency that does not attach to administrative services agreement. So we wanted to clearly outline that in the agreement. So if you turn to page 10, paragraph 10 on page 3, we have duties of care and fiduciary duties outlined in that agreement, which would have made it a little bit messy on the administrative services if it had been on that side. So that's why we broke this out in a very narrow set of duties. And it's an hourly rate to perform these services as well.
Any comments from the board?
And I will just add again, and I know related to Member Costa's comment, it is the expectation that we will, once we locate the online college, we will have a relationship either with the county treasurer in that area to and run the finances the same way as any other district would run them. In the near term, we're leaning on the foundation to provide us that cash flow opportunity.
Okay,
So we would
approve
be
these resolutions.
looking for an approval of the resolution ratifying the agreements.
So moved.
He made the motion, okay. And second by Member Shaw. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we'll go back to the original order of the agenda and do item number 3.
So I'm interested to know how much time you would like us to take on this, because we are very flexible.
I would say the minimum necessary to communicate what we all need to know so that we
An area of live practice for 20 years.
stay out of trouble. And
I think if you highlight the differences between Bagley-Keene and the Brown Act, that would be
Right. Excuse me. On the last item, we need to get into this habit. For the Board of Trustees, we need a roll call
Yes.
for
I'm sorry.
passage of resolutions. Okay.
Okay. So I think we can do this.
You have to wait. We have to do a roll call
Oh,
vote
I'm very
first.
sorry.
Okay. Hildegard Aguinaldo,
Aye.
Darius Anderson. Oh, excuse me, he's not here. Arnaldo Avalos.
Aye.
Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Mon Fawn. Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Valerie Shaw. Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
Alexis Zaragoza.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Ready
All
to
right.
go.
Well, thank you. So there are not a lot of differences between the Brown Act and Bagley-Keene. So that makes this pretty easy. We can roll through this very quickly, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on most of these slides. You have a copy that you can peruse at your leisure. We'd note that we took some liberties with the Thomas Jefferson quote there, but as public officials, you need to know that your business is the public's business, and most of it is supposed to happen out in the sunshine. And you're already used to that, so that's not really going to be a big challenge for you. The Brown Act versus the Bagley-Keene Act. Bagley-Keene applies to state bodies. The Brown Act applies to local agencies, and the online community college district is a local agency. So that's one difference, but really the purpose and the intent of the statutes really are identical. And so they have the same goal of having the people's business generally take place in the open, where the public can hear and participate in the decision-making process. So really, they resemble each other very very much. There are a few differences that relate to the amount of notice that is required, and we'll talk about that very quickly. But again, the purpose, openness, and giving the public an opportunity to take part. So I'm just rolling through these really quickly. Obviously, this board is covered as a legislative body under the Brown Act, but it applies to more than just this body. It would also apply to subcommittees and commissions that are created by formal action of this board. And it doesn't matter if it's just temporary, it doesn't matter if they'll make final decisions, if they'll make recommended decisions to this board. If it's created by a formal act of this board, then it is a committee or subcommittee also subject to the Brown Act. There's one exception, and that's for ad hoc committees, and they have to consist solely of less than a majority of a quorum of this body. So you could have a subcommittee of less than half of the members of this body, and it has to be advisory in nature, can't make a final binding decision, has to be, again, just less than a quorum of this board. They can't have continuing subject matter jurisdiction. It has to truly be ad hoc for a limited purpose, and the subcommittee sets its own meeting schedule. The meeting schedule is not set by this body. And if you meet all of those requirements, then a subcommittee can actually act without complying with the Brown Act. Okay, so what is a meeting? A meeting occurs anytime a majority of the board gets together to discuss, to hear, discuss, or deliberate on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. You have very broad subject matter jurisdiction. Pretty much anything of interest to you in your capacity as a board member over the online community college district is probably within your subject matter jurisdiction. So it's important to note, hear, discuss, or deliberate. It's not just meetings where decisions are made or where formally there are proposals made. Just getting together with a majority of the members of this body and hearing views or information on topics that are within your subject matter jurisdiction, that is a meeting under the Brown Act. Thus, it is subject to the notice and public participation requirements of the Act.
Can you briefly talk about the difference between what you just said and when board members attend a conference, a workshop, where there are more than at least a majority of the board present?
Yes, and in fact, if you would jump to, I think it's slide 5, we talk about non-meetings. So actually, it's slide 15. That's My bifocals failed me there. But meetings do not include individual contacts. Someone corners you at the market, or your neighbor wants to talk to you about something within the subject matter jurisdiction. That is not a meeting. Public conferences that are open to the public. So if you want to go to, ACRO or one of these, or a national conference, even if a majority of the board are there, that is not a problem, because that is not a meeting, and the slide 16 has a little bit of a condition on it. You can go to other local agency meetings or standing committee meetings that are subject to the Brown Act. So you have a subcommittee that's subject to the Brown Act, a majority of the board can attend that, okay? Community meetings, social gatherings. None of those are meetings, but the condition is found on slide 16, and that says a majority of the members cannot discuss district business among themselves at these non-meetings. So if you're going to a community college annual conference and you find yourself with a majority of the board and someone says, hey, what they said in that last workshop about, contracts for administrators, that was really interesting. Okay, you were wading into danger there because a majority of the board is now talking about something within your subject matter jurisdiction. So my advice is always, if you go to these conferences or you go to these other meetings of other public agencies, I generally say don't sit with each other, because that way you can't talk to each other about it, right? But if you do sit together, just don't chat about anything within the subject matter jurisdiction. But I'd spread out, disperse. You want to meet the people anyway.
Can I ask you one more clarification on that?
Yes.
Because of the way we're organized, the executive committee meets in between the Board of Governor meetings to conduct action. That is a subset of the Board of Trustees. What constitutes a majority? Is it a majority of the full board, or is it a majority of the executive committee that meets every other month?
So your executive committee meeting every other month, that is a standing committee, correct? And so you are posting those as according to the Brown Act. So if this is an executive committee function, it should be a majority of the executive committee should not be talking about the matters together. If you're talking about something that's coming before the entire body, then I would go with a majority of the members of this body should not be talking about it. That's the way I would divide it, unless there's something that I'm...
Can I ask a tag-along clarifying question? Is quorum calculated based on the number of slots or the amount of slots filled?
So, I would have to look that up to tell you the truth, because in K-12 districts, I know that that action can only be taken based on a majority of the slots, not the slots actually filled.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked recently for you, and I would have to figure that out.
No problem. Thank you for
But
looking into it.
generally speaking, I would assume that it's going to be the number of slots filled for you, but I would have to confirm that. Okay, so she says I'm correct. Yeah, I think that's a difference between the K-12 world and the higher ed world. But we can confirm that, and we will. We'll talk to Mark about it. Okay, so let's see. I jumped ahead, but that's fine because we didn't really miss anything. The serial meetings. Okay, I do want to talk about that because those are important. And when you think about a serial meeting, think about two different kinds. Sorry. I do not like the way this is formatted. But you are prohibited from having a series of meetings whereby a majority of your members communicate about a matter within your subject matter jurisdiction. And there are two illustrations for how this works. Think about the daisy chain, where person A talks to person B talks to person C talks to person D, and you have a chain effect, and you reach a majority of the board through that way. There is also a way to create an unlawful serial meeting that is like a wheel and a hub and a spoke type of a situation, where you have one hub who is communicating to various board members until you get to a majority. And of course, you can have a combination of the two, where you have a daisy chain with some and a wheel and a spoke with others. The bottom line is, if you get to a majority of your board members discussing something informally or outside of a public meeting that's within your subject matter jurisdiction, then that is a meeting, and it should have been agendized, and you're going to have a Brown Act problem. So I'm going to hand it over to Diane to blaze through it.
Well, I'm going to keep blazing as Chris and I are going to play a little tag team here, and we're going to try to get through. Chris, did you go through this with right here? Yeah, you want to play this portion of the section that I'm going to start with is on your slide number 17. That's going to start with your agenda requirement. And much of this is already taken care of by your administrative staff. As you take a look at your agenda today, it is a perfect Brown Act agenda. So that's a great start here. But the posting requirements are exactly this, is that at least 72 hours prior to the commencement of your meeting, your agenda needs to be posted. It needs to be posted online and in a location that's conspicuous. I will just tell you a really, really quick story because we don't have much time, but I had a client at one point in time when I got the letter from the district attorney. It said that the agenda was not posted in a location where the public could get to, because what the client had done inadvertently, it was not intentional, it was posted, but behind locked gates. So no one could see what the agenda was, and it wasn't posted on the website. So we corrected that quickly. So here, in terms of the Brown Act, at least 72 hours for a regular meeting of the board. For an emergency, for a special meeting of the board, it will be 24 hours, at least 24 hours notice. And again, it's at a location much like this, which is freely accessible to the public, and it must be posted, and great for an online community college, your agenda will be posted online, and also in a conspicuous location where individuals who may not have access to a computer will be able to see that agenda.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. So in the ordinary situation, a community college district is doing the physical posting at the campus.
Mm-hmm.
So we do not have a campus yet. Would you recommend another physical location for posting agenda? And how would we make that effectual? Because the public wouldn't necessarily think of the location that we would think of. How would people know to go to that location to see a notice, or is that something we need to deal with until or before we have a physical location?
Well, it's a great question because you don't have that physical location. But what I would certainly recommend is that we can certainly continue to post it online, and wherever that meeting will be held, it should be posted at that meeting site.
Member Haynes? Oh,
No,
sorry.
you go.
Go ahead.
As we seek to also make the meetings more accessible to individual board members and constraints around travel, et cetera, we are also looking for ways to facilitate that through in virtual settings. And so would love to understand if you have a viewpoint on how, when there's not a physical meeting location, meetings could still meet the terms of the requirements of the Act.
Well, and under the Brown Act, and Chris, you'll probably have to help me with this one, because under the Brown Act, if you're appearing from a location other than where the physical location of the agency is, at least a majority should be present under the Brown Act in that location. So that's what I would look at, and then having virtual access at other virtual locations. But that is something that we'll have to look at, given the dynamics of this college, what we're looking at. So, I'm sorry, there was someone else.
Just one more question.
Hi, Ms. Haynes.
Given that there's two issues. One, that online has no sort of boundaries, and that this is sort of a statewide board of trustees. How is notice determined? How is physical notice, or how should it be determined, given that we're 58 counties? Usually for physical notice, I don't know, 3 locations or half a dozen locations and you're good to go. But given our circumstances, that would appear to be inefficient. Obviously, we can use on our online mode, and I'm sure most people do that, but there's still this somewhat antiquated physical notice. And given that piece, to what extent do we have to extend ourselves beyond the 3, 4, or 5 that would be normal for a local community college district to do?
Trustee Haynes, that's an excellent question. Given the dynamics of this organization, those are the kind of things we will have to look in.
Okay,
Right
good.
now, what the Brown Act is, what it actually says, it talks about the location of the agency where the meeting will be. But this is a unique, so we're going to have to work within those parameters, and we may make recommendations along those lines to say we may want to look at area A, B, and C to ensure that there is that actual notice that's being provided.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up. I believe you said that if there was a remote location, let's say that, you know, the principal place of the meeting was Sacramento, but we had a location in Los Angeles for our Los Angeles members of the, particularly for our executive committee to attend, that there had to be a majority of the executive committee in the alternate location? Is that what you
No, I think I said it, the reverse.
The reverse?
The reverse. And what would have to happen, I'm sorry, you were saying,
No, go ahead.
Trustee?
Go ahead.
And what would have to happen when you do have remote locations, you will have to have the actual posting where those individuals will be, so the public will know this is where the meeting is taking place. So you will have to have that information, which should be posted on the website as to where those virtual locations will be, because again, it's transparency and the opportunity for the public to assist, to participate.
But if we have 2 locations and we have 7 members of this executive committee, we always have to have 4 members in Sacramento for the meeting to be.
Currently, that's what the Brown Act provides for in terms of where the meeting is going to be held, the central location of that meeting. It would be with a majority of that board present there. And then at the remote locations, there'll be the posting, there'll be an opportunity for the public to know exactly where it will be, and for them to be able to participate. That's the current language of the Brown Act, if I have that correctly.
Yeah,
If I have that correct.
Please come to the microphone.
This is the odd disconnect between the Brown Act aimed at local agencies when this is technically a local agency with statewide reach. And what I think the Brown Act says is that if the majority has to meet in one location within the territorial boundaries of the local agency, and the others can be in satellite locations, but the majority has to be within the boundaries, and I think the boundaries are the entire state. So I think you probably have an option, even though you will pick a central office, I think you're probably going to have an option to have a majority of your members in a location that isn't necessarily the home office, as it were, the headquarters. But we can confirm that. But there are going to be a few little strange things that we'll have to figure out, because it really is aimed at local agencies like Southwestern College, which has a limit within San Diego County, I mean, southern part of San Diego County, territorial boundaries, and they're not supposed to hold meetings outside of it generally, because we want people to be able to participate and see a majority of the members acting locally. You have a different situation here, but we'll provide further.
It's important to do that quickly, because we do have a meeting every other month with 7 members.
They'll do. And
We'll do it
again,
right away.
that is unique, the uniqueness and dynamic of this organization, the way it works. With that, I'm going to move on just quickly to the description. Again, your agenda is perfect, so if you refer to your own agenda, it does meet the description requirement, that it has the language that identifies what the business items will be taken care of or taking place that day, or what business will be transacted. So you already have that there. As we move on to the action, again, we cannot discuss anything, the legislative body, meaning this board, will not be able to discuss anything that is not listed on the agenda. And sometimes that happens rather quickly. We just kind of go off on tangents, or members of the public bring up information, and we kind of go off and respond to that. But it is limited to what's identified on that agenda. And there are some exceptions, and they're all listed there for you on the next couple of slides as to when the board may be able to make a brief response to the public, or ask for clarification from staff, or provide direction. Those will be the next couple of slides that you do have there. Again, if you want to say, for example, I think there was a discussion today about having something placed on the future agenda that came from the chancellor. That is a perfect kind of response. It's not currently on the agenda, but you can look to your future agenda for placement of such items. The other part is that the public may ask, and I think that's one of the things that we always have to focus on, is that the public has a right. We're talking about transparency, the opportunity of the public to participate. They may ask for an agenda item to be placed on the agenda. That does not mean that bypasses the process that you have. Currently, the process that you have is either the board president and the chancellor set the agenda, determine whether or not it's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency, of the district, whether it's going to be open, whether it's going to be closed, whether it's an action item, or whether it's not, or if it's an information item. But the public does have that opportunity. Emergency meetings, again, sometimes we'll have clients that say, it's an emergency, it's a meeting, we have to have it. On the other hand, emergency is clearly defined in the statute. So it would be anything that severely impacts or impairs the public health or safety. And the fires, for example, it would be the fires or another unfortunate event. And with that, it talks about at least 1 hour's notice if the media is requesting that notice. There is a difference with the dire emergency, meaning we need it now. So the notice goes out at the same time to the media, as at the same time we're giving notice to the trustees of the board to say, let's get together, let's talk about it. But a dire emergency, again, is specifically identified in the statute and defined in the statute. Public participation, you do it right now. You've done it under the Bagley-Keene Act. The same thing, the members of the public have an opportunity to participate at the regular meeting. If it is a special meeting of the board, it's going to be limited to that item that's on the notice requirement on your agenda that the public has an opportunity to speak to. With that, at any regular or special meeting of the board, a member of the public, it would not be, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to take action, the board to take action before someone has an opportunity to speak. So what we want to ensure is that before the board makes a decision, that the individuals from the public have an opportunity to speak to it before or during consideration of that specific item. This is the part that sometimes gets a little bit tough, but the public has an opportunity to criticize the legislative agency, the legislative body. They can come here and they can make comments in regards to your policies, procedures, and your services, and we sit, we listen, and we may respond, for example, to direct staff to respond to the member of the public or to hear or to ask for clarification. The public records, your agenda is a public record. We're already aware of that, but also those documents that we have, the contract that you have, the PowerPoint presentation you have here today, those are also public records. The one thing that I want to point out, though, is that if you, as member of the board, want to bring items during the course of a meeting and share it with members of your board on a matter that is being considered on the agenda, you're creating a public record, and the public has an opportunity to have access to that record. And closed session, that's you, right?
No, it's actually you, but
Oh,
I
okay.
think time-wise, I think we just say there are categories.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we have the categories listed. Since the legislative intent is to have things done in open, the exceptions to open session discussion are narrowly construed. So we listed the different categories there for you. We're not going to go through them individually at this time, but they're all listed out with an explanation. And then the final thing I wanted to point out is the confidentiality of closed session discussions. Each member of this board, as well as the staff who are involved in closed session discussions, have a duty to keep confidential all of the matters that are discussed in closed session. And there are some serious consequences for violation of this duty to maintain confidentiality. They include written or verbal censure by the board itself of its own members, which is just a public shaming, to personal liability for violation of government code sections, whether it's an injunction, whether actual damages ensue, whether confidential information is used by a public official for their own enrichment. The punishments vary from no punishment at all, but a judicial directive not to disclose it anymore or to keep things secret, to potential civil liability, to potential criminal liability, whether misdemeanor or felony. And finally, there's a risk of removal from office, although I've never seen that done for any violation of the Brown Act. Final warning I want to do is about, since the Brown Act was created, there have been great strides in technology, social media, different modes of communication, and it's easy to get in trouble pretty quickly under the Brown Act, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's text groups, whether it's maintaining a blog. We've seen majorities of public bodies expressing consensus or exchanging information about matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the local agency online or through use of technology. The same rules apply to that as it would to the traditional type of a serial meeting that I talked about before. So I caution you on that. The final part, I'm not going to go through it all, but it's a discussion of the Public Records Act. And the fact of the matter is that things that in the past we thought might be confidential personal records, if you are using personal devices in order to communicate board business, then according to recent precedent, those are public records and those could be accessible, whether it's a personal email account, whether it's your texting on your phone. Those are accessible under the Public Records Act if you are conducting public business. So there's a famous quote from Earl Long that I often read, and if you remember Earl Long, he was a disgraced governor from Louisiana. We've seen worse recently, but I'm not going to get political. But he took up with well, I won't get into detail, but he got in trouble for things he said. Don't write anything you can phone. Don't phone anything you can talk. Don't talk anything you can whisper. Don't whisper anything you can smile. Don't smile anything you can nod. Don't nod anything you can wink. We don't want to go to that point. We don't want to be there. And so what I encourage you is conduct your business in the light of the sunshine. Follow the rules as it relates to the Brown Act and the Public Records Act, but think twice before you hit send, because very few things remain secret in this world today. Thank you so much for your attention. We'll loiter about if there are any questions afterwards, but we're going to let you move on right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any board members have any comments or questions? I guess I would encourage the board members to read through this whole PowerPoint at their leisure, and if they have any questions, we could run it by folks. But I think that was a good highlight presentation. Okay, so next item is now item 5, and that would be the delegation of a Chief Technology Officer. Ellen.
President Epstein, Vice President Haynes, and members of the Board of Trustees, we present for consideration Resolution 2018-08, delegation of authority to the Chancellor to contract with a Chief Technology Officer. Chief Technology Officer would initiate early planning required to define the district's technical strategy, establish architecture and implementation strategy of both educational technology and support platforms, and stand up early information technology operations. The CTO would also help vet needed technologies in the development of an operational roadmap, make implementation progress necessary to achieve the early milestones defined in statute by the district, including the launch of 3 pilot pathways for working learners delivered by the end of 2019. The skill set of a CTO is needed to ensure proper consideration of effective student services and learning delivery that's built on improving the student experience at each engagement point along the adult learner's journey. This includes things like career exploration, educational pathway planning, college application and enrollment, online learning and student services, credential completion, apprenticeship placement, transition into the labor market with the goal of increasing wage gains and aligned with the student's newly acquired competencies. The CTO role would initially be offered on a contractual basis, and with the board's approval, we anticipate posting an announcement of the opportunity and beginning to accept applications by early October. For this and other positions, we will continue to post RFPs and announcements on the Chancellor's Office website until the district's web presence is developed. With the adoption of the contracts with the foundation, we hope to accelerate that web presence.
So any board comments? Yes.
With the CTO, this will be maybe a question for a little bit later on, but some of the decisions that the CTO will make will have long-term impacts on the online college. I just want to make sure that their communication with this board would be very open, so that then we can make sure that the strategic decisions are being made the way we want them to be made.
That's right. We are really trying to hit a sweet spot between what we need to deliver in the short run without locking long-term, costly financial decisions around technology acquisition, especially around some of the key platform decisions. In particular, before there is a CEO in place. And so we're very conscious of the line between planning and ensuring that early implementation decisions don't implicate us in an adverse way in the long term.
Wonderful.
Member Fong?
Do we have a number or a dollar amount for this contract, or that's to be determined later?
So the resolution indicates market rates. We've begun a process of identifying what that looks like. We're looking for comparable positions both within the CCC system. We are not finding directly comparable positions, largely because the type of CTO we need would carry some responsibilities that a traditional chief information officer would also need to carry out, specific to internally facing operational management of technology. And so, we are looking at kind of some of the technology director, CTO type of positions, as well as looking at comparable enterprises who have a role like this. And so we hope to use that to guide the compensation discussions about what identifies a market rate. Right now, it is looking like between the sort of early 200s into the 250 range.
Member Costa?
Just clarifying that point. So when you say market rate and comparable institutions, is that outside of the public sector?
No.
Okay.
But it is for other large enterprise online providers.
Member Aguinaldo?
And I also, Member Costa, I think part of it is also we're not trying to get the type of CTO that would need to build new technologies necessarily, but we do need a level of expertise around integration and other aspects of that are a highly technical skill set.
Do we already have some people in mind, and what's the timeline for bringing this person on board?
We do not have people in mind already. What we hope to do is to circulate the job description once it's finalized very broadly. And conduct a search process to allow us to fill the position upon identification of an effective candidate.
Move approval.
No, I have another question. So the term of this contract is what, and how will it be affected by the hiring of a CEO?
Good question. So we have not defined the term of the contract. We would like to entertain that conversation with a prospective CTO candidate. Again, we ideally it would be preferable to hire a CEO and a CTO sort of in that order. Just given the needs that we have immediately, we wanted to allow for that term to be not more than a year to allow the CEO sufficient flexibility to change direction or to make ultimately longer term hiring decisions about key positions in the permanent leadership team.
Yeah, I think.
Back to the CEO. Given the expertise that we're requiring, and really wanting to get the best person, but also understanding that, what's the sense of the bandwidth of multiple candidates in this area, and the ability to move this forward with I don't want to say due haste, but quickly.
We actually have the benefit and the understanding and the learnings from the recent search that was conducted in the Chancellor's Office for a director for digital innovation, so Barney's position. And so that has given us a fair amount of benefit but that and looking at additional job descriptions for other enterprises similar to this one, a strong sense of what that position entails. And so we believe that we can do that in the fall timeframe fairly efficiently. And we have the benefit of being located in California, where there is a fair amount of local talent in this area that there is to draw from. So we're very optimistic about that.
I just want to say that this is not something that I think is optimum. I think it's, again, driven by the pace at which we have to get this college up and running. I would much prefer to have the CEO involved in choosing a CTO. I think that On the other hand, you don't want to tell people that you're recruiting that this is a dead-end position. So it's a very tricky balance to get the best person, but to also leave the CEO with the flexibility to go in a different direction if that's their choice. So I just think it's very important to be very careful about this recruitment. We want to get the best possible person. Hopefully it will work out that it will become a long-term person that meshes well with the CEO. But I do think we need to be very careful and keep in mind the rather unusual nature of this recruitment.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, move for approval.
Second.
Member Rawlings, second was Member Costa. Okay, all in favor? Roll call, thank you. And I'm afraid to say, Member Zaragoza, you are not entitled to vote, so we won't be reading your name.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Arnaldo Avalos. Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Mon Fan.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
Okay, the item is approved. And now we have a very difficult subject, the appointment of Amy Costa to the Executive Committee. Item 6.
Well, I don't know about that.
De-
You've been asking too many questions.
Deputy Chancellor Gonzalez.
I think I've had a change of heart.
It's not your choice.
Thank you, Mr. President.
President Epstein, Board of Trustees, Chancellor Oakley, for the record, this is Resolution 2018-09. It is the appointment of Amy Costa to the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees. The resignation of former President Estelano now requires the appointment of a 7th member to the Executive Committee. We believe that Trustee Costa brings an expertise in higher education as well as state and budget policy making and a very unique perspective on the governor's intentions on establishing this district. So with that, we recommend approval of this resolution.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, that was Member Fawn and Member Aguilado. Any discussion of this? No tough questions for Member Costa? Okay, all in favor? Roll call, geez. Thank you. I'm really glad I have an aggressive vice president here. Yeah, she's a real local college trustee.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Mon Fan.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
Okay, item number 7, Deputy Chancellor.
Item number 7 is the Executive Committee meeting dates. At your last meeting, this board adopted significant authority to provide the Executive Committee to do a lot of the work and meet on a monthly basis. This Executive Committee will meet every month with your first meeting starting on October 8th, right after this meeting. What you have in front of you are different dates. So one is the Executive Committee will meet every single time that the Board of Governors meets. The different dates that you see on there are based on the doodle poll that all of you filled out. You are all very busy people, so we couldn't quite find a day of the week. But this is what you have in front of you where the maximum amount of members are able to attend.
Well, I think I want to correct that. The Executive Committee meets every other month, and the full Board of Trustees meets every other month in different months. Right?
No.
Executive.
We meet before the Board of Governors meetings.
Yes.
And then having meetings.
So,
For each Board of
if I may
Governors.
clarify.
Yeah.
So the Board of Trustees will meet on days that the Board of Governors meets. In addition to that, the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees will meet every month. So on a day or on a month where the Board of Governors is not meeting, those would be your October, December, February. On the days that the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees meet, the Executive Committee will also meet. So for example, in November, the Executive Committee will meet on day 1 in the morning. Then it will be Board of Governors. On day 2, we'll start off with Board of Governors and end with Board of Trustees. That was the direction that the Board of Trustees gave at the last meeting.
Okay.
Look on Tom's face is priceless.
You will not resign.
No, no, it's just 3 meetings in a 2-day period. But we do also, if that proves to be unnecessary, we can cancel that executive
correct.
meeting on the same time.
Sure,
as
but
that.
I think,
that
President,
works.
if I may, briefly, I think the idea is that the vast majority of the business of the online college is going to be conducted by the executive committee. There are some fairly high-level areas of jurisdiction that the Board of Trustees has reserved to itself. But the typical, in fact, the contracts that are approved today would typically be going before the executive committee. And so there shouldn't be a lot of duplication, and the executive committee will be reporting to the full Board of Trustees, hopefully in a fairly concise way, what the actions have been by the executive committee over the prior 2 months. So that's the model that we were aiming for.
Member Baum.
And it'd probably be helpful just to restate who the members of the executive committee are now that we're back to a full complement. But on the months that the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees are not meeting, and it's just solely an executive committee meeting, it's still to be determined the time and then the location of those meetings. And my argument would be that if they are either doing them first thing in the morning or last thing in the day, or perhaps even evening, if that was an option. But I defer to the members of the executive committee to determine that.
We'll try to take that into account. Also, we do plan to do the executive committee meetings in both Northern and Southern California. We would have the principal meeting in Sacramento, but offer a place in Southern California like we did for the last time.
And given the possibility that you may need a majority of members at the main location, you might even, with 2 of the members at least that I know in the Bay Area, even have that meeting in the Bay Area and then a Southern California location too.
I could clarify, you will not need a majority in one location. A majority must be within your territorial. I showed your general counsel.
Okay.
The statute, so you would be fine. You don't even need a majority in one single location.
Okay, that's good. For those who were not on the microphone, we don't need to have a majority in either location, just so we have a majority among the 2 locations. So we'll take that into consideration. I mean, I think it's partially a matter of it's we have the facilities and it's easier for the staff to do it in Sacramento, but we will figure that out. And I also want to comment on the schedule. You can see we tried very hard to get the executive committee meetings to be exactly 1 month in between each of the 2 board meetings, but because of people's availability, we had to sometimes schedule it within 3 weeks of one of the other board meetings. So in some cases, there'll probably be less to report than in others.
I'll move the item.
Motion by Member Costa.
Second.
Second by Member Aguinaldo. All in favor? Aye. Oh, nope. I'll get to it.
Hildegard Aguinaldo. Aye. Arnold, Jeffrey Baum.
Aye.
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Mon Fawn.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
Alexander Walker Griffin.
Aye.
Okay. We have one last item, which is discussion of next steps. Senior advisor.
And as Ajita comes up, I'd just like to take a minute to again thank the board for working with us through this process. It's not usual that a brand new district is stood up overnight, but we're going to do that. And we're going to get it done as effectively and efficiently as possible. I did want to say, as before Ajita starts her comments of the next steps, we have been interviewing search firms for the CEO search. We have settled on a search firm. I want to thank Board of Trustee President Tom Epstein for participating in those interviews. The name of the firm that we expect to move forward with is named Wheelus. And we want to get that search started as quickly as possible, so there will be an agreement that we execute. We'll be working with our attorney firm and such, but we think we have a search firm that has agreed to our aggressive timeline. And it was difficult to do given the nature of the search and the nature of the person that we're looking for, and quite frankly, the salary range that we would need to bring the CEO in. That did eliminate a few of the search firms given their the range that they typically do searches in exceeds our ability to pay. And of course, we reminded the search firm that the most important part of this job will be their rewards in heaven. So.
So I provided a written update for everyone, but wanted to pull out a few highlights and then also talk just briefly about the upcoming meeting of the Executive Committee on the 8th of October. So the District Advance Team is identifying and mapping key work streams and milestones to launch the early set of pathways with the intent of using lessons learned to provide information to effectively scale the new competency-based education model for working learners. The foundational step in that process has been a human-centered design thinking effort to guide the development of design concepts and prototypes that can be tested with relevant stakeholders, first and foremost with working learners. The first focus group was with working learners was held earlier this month in Sacramento. There will be another later this week in Los Angeles. Efforts are also underway to develop the research and development strategy and early capacity to evaluate comprehensively the early pathway pilots. This again will generate instructive learnings around how to enhance program delivery and ensure that the culture that we're building around the college and the systems that we have facilitate continuous improvement as we guide the district's development. Early pathway work continues to progress, working with key partners. Under the previously announced Healthcare Business Systems pathway, the advanced team began work with SEIU, UHW, and employer partners to start mapping key skills and competencies leading to a medical coding certification. Similarly, in the IT pathway, the previously announced work has begun with partners CompTIA, which is the leading IT standards organization, Cisco, and Google around initial mapping of skills and competencies related to these certifications. And in the supervisory pathway announced at the last meeting, efforts are underway to determine both the initial sector focus and to identify lead partner organizations. As an update on the CEO search, which the Chancellor gave, the piece that I wanted to pull out was we anticipate spending a good amount of time at the Executive Committee meeting on October 8th, discussing the search firm's work in greater depth, including getting needed input from the board to help guide the search process. The last thing I wanted to mention is sort of overall, as we continue to get deeper into these work streams, we will continue to do more to engage a broad cross-section of stakeholders that are going to be critical to the district's success. Happy to entertain any questions. I know we're maybe over time.
We're doing well.
Okay.
Now that we managed to shorten that Brown Act presentation.
You may never know what you don't know.
We'll remind them.
Any comments or questions from the board? Yes.
This may be an item for the Executive Committee more, future looking, but a comment I made to the Chancellor maybe at the last IDO meeting was being thoughtful about as we build out this initial few stages. We're looking on the instructional side, but also on the operational side, I'd be interested in seeing some of the best practices that we may have out there. So creating financial structures that are appropriate, right? So it would include pre-funding, post-employment benefits, taking a look at the per stirs, all those kinds of things, having a a plan in place as we get the CEO and the CTO on board, that we're really able to start off with some good practices.
I think that's great. I think there's two parts, both the outcome of the IDEO work, which will be presented before the board in November, as well as the work that the advanced team is doing in benchmarking against certain institutions. We've been fortunate in having a number of leading providers open their playbooks to us to share more about their operational functions, and so we'll be able to report out a little bit more on what we're learning there.
And just building on Member Rawlings' point too, I'm hoping that you bring some of that knowledge to the board,
Yes.
that perhaps we get presentations from the folks at Arizona State University or some of the commercial providers like Coursera and others, that so that it raises our understanding of where this field is and what are the best practices, because we need to be much more advanced in our understanding if we're going to be effective in our ability to oversee this institution.
Noted, and we will certainly arrange for that. Some of the work that IDEO is doing is digging into some of these other models, and so they'll also be available to share kind of some of the identification of benchmarks and understandings that they've had from these providers as well. So we'll try to get a broader cross-section for you.
Yeah, no, I just would like at some point I'd like to hear from somebody who's doing it somewhere
Yes.
else, just to say what, just to share. Occasionally we'll have presentations of just for our own enrichment and understanding.
We can do that.
If that's it, then we have one public comment, who always gets the last word.
That's you, John Stankus. And which John reminded us that we probably need to have a new public forum card so that folks don't have to mark off governors and add district and online to the. So, Christina. Okay.
That
perfect.
wasn't
Thank
me.
you. John.
That was Christina. Good afternoon. I wanted to introduce myself to the Board of Trustees. I am John Stanskis. I am the president of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what the Academic Senate sees as its role in the formation of a new college that will serve students, and our mission. Our mission is to ensure that we comply with the laws of the state of California, and the creation of a new fully online college is part of the law. And so it is incumbent upon us to provide the voice of faculty in academic and professional matters so that we can ensure the best quality instruction to the students served by the district. Right now, there aren't any full-time faculty or organizational structure representing that voice, and so in the absence of such a structure in a college, it is incumbent upon us to provide that. Generally, the Academic Senate is expected to participate in the creation of board policies and administrative procedures that define college governance structures, curricular design and review, hiring processes for faculty, and academic senates are expected to participate in the hiring for administrators and staff in that way. And I am here to tell you we are available to do all of those things as appropriate to the Board of Trustees. I wanted to note in the agenda today there was a talk of a chief technology officer, which seems to have some of the duties of a chief instructional officer role. When you talk about overseeing instructional programs and the design and delivery of those to benefit students, and that might be an area where it would be important to have a faculty voice in the creation of that. While I am just one person, I represent 60,000 people who are faculty in the community college system, and I am certain that I could find appropriate voices for this work that will engage in the mission of this new district and new college, and work as hard as they can to make sure it's successful. So thank you.
Thank you. There being no other business? This meeting of the Board of Trustees is adjourned.